I am pleased to introduce our first presenter for today, that is Ekta Parashar. Ekta, you have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Ekta Parashar, and I'm an enterprise solution architect here at Amazon Web Services. I have around 17 years of experience working with some of the large OEM organizations, including TCS and Microsoft. It's been 2 years that I've been working with Amazon Web Services. Today we'll be presenting our DevOps story, which REAN Cloud has been successfully implemented at Ellucian. I have with me Sanju Burkule, who is the Senior Director and Head for India Operations. We also have Gunanand Nagarkar, who is the Director, Engineering from REAN Cloud. REAN Cloud are AWS partners that help customers build and develop on AWS Cloud and really take advantage of everything which AWS has to offer. So if you go and ask different people about what is DevOps, what we have seen that people actually go ahead and give very different answers. And the reason is there are a lot of different ways in which you can go and use these various tools which AWS provides. These tools to develop your own DevOps workflow. And we have seen a lot of our customers using these different tools in a very different and unique ways to achieve what they have been successfully able to implement. It will be really great to hear the story from REAN Cloud and see how they have been able to do DevOps at Ellucian and what's their story. Before we get into that, let's try and understand what is DevOps. So, Amazon Web Services has tried to define DevOps, and this is the definition what we have landed. DevOps is the combination of cultural philosophies, practices, and tools that increases an organization's ability to deliver applications and services at high velocity. And I really want to focus here on the last word, which is high velocity. The reason is speed and velocity is something what is being increasingly asked by our application developers to produce, whether it's in the terms of application development or whether it's in the terms of the releases or in terms of producing or enabling new services or enabling new features and capabilities within the products. And that's important because these things actually go back to our customer base, and these are the things which actually bring back the value to our businesses. We are seeing a lot of our customers demanding the same capabilities and features from Amazon Web Services also, and at a very much higher rate than ever before. And because of this rate of innovation, we have been, as a company, have been able to release more than 1,000 features and services last year. Now, whenever we are in such a high velocity cycle, one of the biggest challenges which organizations actually face is around the ops stack. When the application developer is actually developing these applications, your ops stack also has to come along with us, right? Which means that the application development need to require to adjust themselves with the operational paradigms to adjust with this high velocity and high speed. Of course, which means that when we are developing these applications at a faster rate, at the same time we need to maintain a very high standard in terms of either stability or in terms of security. And security is a very key thing when you are actually developing any application or deploying any DevOps workflow in the cloud. So I want to take through in the next few slides in terms of how do we go ahead and do that. Now, these are the various services and the tools which Amazon Web Services offers to develop a successful DevOps workflow in the cloud. So let's start with some of the simpler services like Code Commit. Code Commit is a managed service which offers private Git repository on AWS. And then we have Code Deploy. Code Deploy is nothing but it enables you to deploy your packages, your application assets to your compute tier. That compute tier can be either EC2 or your compute here can be your underlying stock or whatever service you have been using. We also have another service called as AWS Code Pipeline, in which you can actually go ahead and orchestrate the complete motions right from your code commit to your code deployment. So the reason why I thought it will be interesting to put these three services together is using these services, you can go ahead and build a continuous integration and a continuous delivery cycle, which is completely fully managed. All these services are fully managed, and you don't need to require any kind of a underlying EC2 layer to deploy these services. The next set of services which are important is our Elastic Compute, which is our underlying compute engine or a virtual server for hosting. Now, Amazon has been continuously iterating and continuously improving the cost of virtual server hosting right from the time when we launched in 2006. And this is a great place to start your DevOps practice. With EC2 infrastructure, you can marry your code and apply your networking configurations. You can have your own security policies, and you can really build a very large, stable, and a secure platform for a high-velocity DevOps workflow. And if in the organization, if your DevOps practice is really organized and is matured, you can even look at containerization and documentation. And for doing that, you can leverage a managed service, which is EC2 Container Service. It's relatively a new service compared to the rest of the other services which I have been talking about, but we are continuously adding new features, and more interestingly, we are giving you a lot of integration points with the other Amazon ecosystem, which is like different services. And finally, if you don't want to host your services, or if you don't want to use your underlying EC2 infrastructure, then you can even go ahead and use services like Amazon Beanstalk. Amazon Beanstalk allow you to manage and deploy your own application, and the rollout of the application, the deployment of the application is something which can be catered by Beanstalk. Again, it's a fully managed service. So without worrying about scaling in, scaling out your infrastructure, or using what load balancer to use, how to configure the load balancer, Beanstalk can be used to offload these activities, and Beanstalk can do it for you. And Beanstalk kind of a services can really help you in leveraging, or rather accelerating, your complete application deployment lifecycle on a completely software-defined infrastructure, which is Amazon Web Services. Next, I want to kind of take a few minutes and want you to know about also some of the new cool services which we have, which is around Amazon API Gateway. If you want to move away from servers, and then if you are looking at some of the additional services in which you want to break down some of your common tasks, then you can look at services like Amazon API Gateway. It's very common nowadays to expose your own services through API Gateway, and especially when you're trying to build a microservices-based architecture. Breaking down a monolithic application into smaller services which are more consumable. Gateways are the ways, or rather API Gateway is the way to kind of go about, but deploying an API Gateway can be really, really tricky sometimes. Especially because you need to take care of scalability, you need to take care of the security, and it often requires even metering. All these features are very well integrated in AWS Managed Service, which is an API Gateway. Also, for a decoupled infrastructure and for a microservices-based architecture, there is a service called as Lambda. As we decompose our large monolithic application into smaller chunks, maybe in the form of cron jobs, which we typically run on our compute, rather than using these underlying infrastructure or servers for doing that kind of a job, you can offload all these smaller functions into Lambda kind of a service. Think of Lambda as an event-driven based service in which I can define my application logic or I can define my functions. Lambda as of now supports 3 or 4 languages like Node.js, Python, Java, and recently we have also started supporting C++. I'll give you another example to kind of think about how Lambda can be actually used. A lot of media companies actually go and upload their video files or their audio files in S3. And once the files gets uploaded in S3, after that you need to do some sort of processing on these files, right? These kind of functions, rather than writing on an application which is running on EC2, I can write it in service like Lambda, which rather than running it 24/7, will be invoked only once your application invokes it. So you pay only for the times the service has been invoked, rather than paying for 24/7 running EC2 instances. And of course, the next service is CloudFront, which actually helps you in your performance improvement by providing edge level caching. Then finally, we don't have anything if I don't have governance and compliance in place. While even though we may be accelerating the rate of change and have a very faster deployment life cycle, but if I don't have accountability, if I don't have security, then nothing is going to work. Now, AWS Config is a service which allows you to have resource inventory, configuration history, as well as change notifications. It also allows me to set config rules in which you can define your policies in terms of, let's take an example, all my EBS volumes in AWS has to be encrypted. I can have such policies or rules being defined in config rules. So for governance with DevOps, it can be really challenging sometimes, and services like AWS Config can really help. Then we have a next service which is CloudTrail. CloudTrail is a service which maintains a complete record of activities. Think of it as an audit trail in the AWS environment, which means any and every API call which is happening to the platform gets logged in the CloudTrail kind of a service. And at the back end, CloudTrail stores all the log files in S3 bucket. From a monitoring perspective, we have a service called as a CloudWatch, which does the monitoring around various services. For example, for EC2, if I need to measure what is the CPU utilization, I can use CloudWatch to give me that parameter. Or for example, for RDS, how many database connections? CloudWatch kind of a service can go ahead and give me these parameters. Now moving ahead, I want to wanted to share the stage and set the stage with these different tools and services which Amazon Web Services provide. But overall, we have more than 40 plus services which are available. These services are right from databases to your big data offering, which is around managed Hadoop cluster, or it can be around real-time analytics like Analysts. We also offer services which are around managed databases, which is Oracle, SQL Server, and our own database offering, which is Aurora. Now, with this stage, I want to hand it over to REAN Cloud and want to understand what kind of tools they have been using for Ellucian and how they have been able to assemble all these services to provide something useful which Ellucian has been using. So I hand it over to Sanju now. Sanju, over to you.
So thank you, Ekta. So Ekta gave you an overview of all the really fundamental tools that AWS has. And so the best way to understand how all these tools come together, how all these services work together, the best way I think is to help with a customer story on how exactly they proceeded with it. And for that reason, we are going to take example of Ellucian. Ellucian is one of the customers who started the DevOps journey in 2014, and basically they are a really large company. They went to SunGard. They have around 18 million students, 2,400 institutions, so very large enterprise, and they wanted to get onto the cloud. They wanted to get all the benefits that Ekta had talked about. So it's a major transformation, and everybody starts, any large enterprise, when they want to start on AWS, there is a program, very good program from Amazon, which is called AWS Test Drive. So they started on the test drive, and once you register yourself and you want to move smaller workloads and play with AWS, uh, then they came across Raincloud there. So Amazon and Raincloud, we really work closely together. We are the premier consulting partners, and once you register yourself on test drive, it will point you to Raincloud to get the best practices and how to really go about it, which services to use, and those kinds of suggestions are given. And that's how we met Ellucian. Ellucian contacted us. They said that we want to move to cloud very rapidly. Uh, we want to have 3 applications within 3 months. We have everything on premise in these institutions today. We really wanted to look into all these choices that DevOps really presents. How does DevOps and cloud work together? So these were some of the questions Ellucian had. They tried for some time, and what we did is in 2014 basically we began our journey. We created a cloud strategy for them. So Bill is the VP in Ellucian, and there is another video that is on YouTube. We will share that video where Bill talks about in great detail on the specifics of how we went on many different decisions that you have to take. Uh, so there is a lot to understand when we are looking at DevOps. Uh, and basically it's a combination of consulting and understanding business as well. It is not just a technology play. We need to understand what are all the IT servers doing, which ones to have pipelines for in the beginning, which services to use, which are the units or programs that you want to use DevOps approach for in the beginning, which ones to phase out to later stages. So these kinds of very important decisions based on the complexity of how things are happening in large enterprises today, based on how many units are playing in this entire delivery story. Based on these kinds of things, we have to create a cloud strategy. And so that is the first phase where we began. And there are multiple drivers for each company. When they look into DevOps, somebody may be looking for customer experience, somebody for innovation, somebody to improve the quality. So if you look at the last 16 years, basically after the year 2000, uh, there are 52% of Fortune 500 companies which are no longer Fortune 500. Okay, so you look at the virtualization move, the cloud related transformation migrations that have happened. You look at companies like Netflix, you don't hear of Blockbuster any longer. Means the rate at which new companies have gone into the Fortune 500 space, whether it is Uber growing or Ola in India, you can see the customer experience of what we were doing before and what we are doing now, and how DevOps is helping to transform business. Okay, not just the technology aspect of it. So that is the focus of what experience do you want to give to your customer. So that's a major transformation driver. Okay. The next is about providing innovative, very fast services, uh, and if you want to even change the business model itself. Uh, for example, many people would provide servers to other businesses like in hospitals, and then on those servers you would put softwares. So you require the entire cycle of ordering those servers, getting them on site, having somebody from your company go on site and then provide those services, as opposed to changing the business model itself, where you can improve the operational efficiency as well, where you can have something on the cloud, uh, provide the similar services, provide access through Amazon Edge, and then uh, maybe even change the business model from licensing to subscription based. And when you look at all these models on how companies like AFB have been getting so many hotels around, uh, uh, all the businesses that really that really utilize the cloud not just for a technology transformation change, but for a business model change, they get the maximum advantage from this particular migration. These are the two aspects that each large company needs to consider. It's not just for small companies. DevOps is for very large business transformations and DevOps transformations as well. Okay. Now, how do you really go about it? In the sense, what? Uh, uh, so I would recommend thinking in three phases. That's at least what we did at Ellucian. So basically, planning is a very important phase. What are you going to do? What is the concept? Which services really are going to improve your business? There are servers which are inward looking, like let's say HR services, finance services, which are all helping in IT, but they're helping inward. And then there are other servers that you have which are directly bringing revenue for the company. So the servers that are running Paytm, for example, servers that are giving you the results when you log into the Ola app. So these servers, which ones, how to phase the entire transformation, how to plan it out is something that really requires the leaders of the company to sit together, create a proper solution architecture uh, at a business level as well as at a technology level, and then go into the implementation phase of it, and make sure that the implementation is ready for the operations. The operations team might not be ready to pick up the fast changes that come through the DevOps pipelines. So you have to plan it correctly, have operations team in the mix when you're planning, and make sure that they're ready to provide all the new changes that we really expect them to take. For example, the changes are like having skilled people who have AWS knowledge, having the knowledge for some of these technologies that Ekta talked about, code pipelines uh, and how to do various kinds of deployments. So two very important things when you think of DevOps is how are you going to measure the progress and how are you going to see the progress. So visualization and measurement are key aspects. Uh, for various phases that are happening, you want to see which things have failed in red color. You want to see how much time they are taking each of these phases. So these are very important. Unless you have a dashboard which shows you the timings of each step for a given pipeline, uh, you that would not be a really serious DevOps implementation without having these visualizations. So you want to find out who checked in the code, what exactly happened. You want to have good quality metrics in place, and let's look at what are the kinds of metrics that these large companies who say that they have been doing DevOps, what are the kinds of metrics we are looking at. So high performing organizations, they basically are looking at really significant change. It's a paradigm shift. And here are some numbers. These are from Puppet Labs State of the DevOps report. Okay, people, high performing IT team, they spend 22% less time on unplanned work. Okay, they have 200x improvement. These are real numbers from 25,000 respondents who have shifted some of their pipelines, some of their products into DevOps. So when we say 200x, in traditional IT organizations, you would have a lead time and do deployments maybe once in 9 months, once in 6 months. And when we say we are going to have 200 times more frequent deployments, how does that really happen? What does IT need to do to really get into this kind of a change? So 24x faster recovery times from failures. It's not like getting everybody on a crit call and 20 people are listening across the globe. How can you reduce that recovery time in a huge manner? So 24 times is really a big number. And lastly, the security aspect of it. Everybody, when they have to move to cloud, a very critical angle is the security angle. We all know how many attacks happen all the time on your machines, uh, and Amazon has really very good quality documentation to understand and implement some of the best practices. And uh, so given these characteristics that we expect from high performing organizations, there are two simple measures, okay, which are direct measures. One is throughput and second is stability. Okay, so Shri Vasireddy is the founder of Raincloud, and he was the first public sector solutions architect for AWS before he founded Raincloud. So what he saw when he was working in Amazon, in companies like Amazon, when we say they are really doing good and they have high performing IT teams. So let's say a developer, he has, when he meets people in confluences and he used to meet developers around, they file a defect, and the next day it would be fixed and live the next day itself. So the kind of rate at which changes happen in these companies, they are absolutely phenomenal. And so the deployment frequency is a key metric on how many times do you do deploys. What can you do to make those deployments faster? How can you automate the testing around it? What tools does it take to get some of those testings done? Mm. So these are things we measured at Ellucian. We improved the frequency significantly. We improved the lead time. How much time does it take after the code is committed? We all know about infrastructure as code. Once that code is committed, how much time does it take to take it to production? And while you're introducing this fast rate of change, how do you maintain your stability? If something goes wrong, what is your MTTR, mean time to recover? These are absolutely key metrics, and I will walk you through some of the angles of quality as well. Quality of deployment. So it's not just migration of moving your existing images as is to AWS. We look at the services that AWS has, and how do Google, Facebook, Twitter, Netflix, how are they really using these services to get very high reliability? Means how many times have you faced that you go to Facebook and you are not able to get into it? So the reliability, the stability, the security angle, the responsiveness of the customers, how fast they respond. So these are the qualities that define a high performing organization. Okay. So earlier, before Netflix went into DevOps, for example, it was taking around 6 to 9 months for them to even say that they support something like a Sony player. And what we are what they do now is within under 1 month they are able to support a new player. The kind of pipelines they have created to move to get market share, this directly results in an increased market share. The more players you support, it directly improves your top line and it impacts your business. So those are some of the things I want to touch upon. Okay, so we are running out of time, so I'll be proceeding slightly faster here. Uh, so this is an important one for how do you look at resources. When we say resources, here this is a very simple graph which shows that after you start using a resource for 80%, whether it's a person, whether it's a process, um, what you will see that after 80%, the wait time really goes high if the resource is utilized more than 80%. If you have a star performer in your team, everybody is waiting on him. If you have only one environment, a test environment, everybody plans around that, it becomes a bottleneck. So resource utilization is more than 80%, as opposed to why cannot each developer have his own test platform? Even if it's created just for 2 hours, can we create a lab which is dynamically created and dynamically disposed? How can we remove the bottlenecks on some of these resources? So these are important questions that DevOps really helps. And this is a quick table. You can get a quick idea of um, how some of these large companies fare. If you go read from top to bottom, you'll see the differences between many large enterprises today and some of the high performing DevOps IT environments. And with that, let me show, I think what we can do is Gigi, if you can help on explaining how take it to the next level and explain the DevOps framework. What are the kinds of things people can look into when now they want to get into the DevOps part of it? What kind of frameworks will help them? Gigi, over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Sanju. So we heard from Ekta the various services that we can use and are available, 40 plus more. At AWS, we heard from Sanju how and why it was critical for Ellucian to take that route and how we helped Ellucian. I'm going to quickly walk us through some of the important aspects of how do we at REAN do it and what is the framework, what is the process, what are the tools and technology that we use. And starting with the a typical framework beyond a coding design framework like the business framework, the process framework, you have to and one has to make sure of having a automated and reliable way of testing, deploying and continuous integration. We might have read that everywhere. I'm just repeating that. There's no doubt you need that in your piece of framework. The infrastructure code that is getting developed needs to be in small increments and needs to be focusing on the desired state. Version control of the code of the system and the configuration along with the application code is a super critical aspect that you need to have in the framework that is being followed for DevOps. Only when all of these and possibly a few more come together, you get to a DevOps adoption, which brings you the values that we talked about earlier. Moving on your left in the slide, it's something called as bimodal IT, which comes from Gartner. Gartner calls it bimodal IT. At this point where, I mean, we are at a stage where we really need to look at this, and almost every other company which gets into DevOps transformation via migration into cloud looks at this. It's very important to see and how it fits in there. Like you have your own IT where businesses are going toward digital transformations, where DevOps transformation and using DevOps is a need and becomes a need and pretty easily accepted. But when you look at the second arm of the IT, the legacy, the traditional IT is still there. You always get stuck with those. You have to work on reducing the cost of it. You do not have the budgets for moving them to the cloud. There is always a decision to be made. What do I do with it? Do I just do my digital businesses in a new DevOps-centric, cloud-centric manner? Or do I also look at my traditional legacy businesses like CRM, HR systems, ERPs, and do something about it? As an IT owner, as the CIOs of the companies, what do I really need to do? Can I just pick one? Can I just live with that? When we talk about traditional ITs, I mean, it's not just DevOps transformation and using that. You could very well do lift and shift, and lift and shift is not necessarily a bad thing. sometimes you may not even have an option because you might be running against a time. Your data center release may be getting expired and you have to do it within the next certain time. So lift and shift for the traditional IT may just be the only solution for your businesses to be running. And while you do that, it's critical to look at, can you do that in a cloud-enabled virtualization mode? Can you bring in some DevOps-centric transformation in that? Even when they are legacy, not for the reason of possibly getting more changes, because in the legacy you may not have a lot of changes getting in at a frequent pace like you might have in your digital businesses that are coming up in last few months or years, where DevOps is a certainty. You will do that. It's critical to look at the lift and shift and see the traditional ITs even when you're doing lift and shift to see in the context of DevOps. Like for example, many of us, you have our data centers running at a DR or the applications running in DR in our data centers. And when you have a hot and a cold DR, we're actually ending up paying twice. And almost always, whenever you really need the DR, it doesn't work because you may not have done the DR test at some recent time, and some SLAs are like just piling up on the DR. And so when you think of lifting and shifting some of those things to cloud, you will have to think in terms of, do I really need to bring up that secondary set of solutions running there, or can I rely on my cloud to give me that reliability and that DR aspect of or HA aspect of the solution that I want? And if you just do duplicate there as is in the cloud, then possibly it is not cloud migration, because you're not saving on it while you're just ending up paying the same that you were when you were on-prem. And that really doesn't make sense when you're moving to cloud, even for traditional IT. You have to use it in a cloud-enabled virtualization mode so that you at least pay once, you save on your cost. The efficiency and cost plays a very, very important role when you are thinking of going to that DevOps transformation or walking that path. Ultimately, you want to get to DevOps, be it digital, be it traditional. And we all know, we heard about it from Sanju as well as Ekta. It's a cultural shift, it's a mind shift, it's a process shift. It's not easy, I can vouch for that. We have faced that at Ellucian. It takes time. You have to plan and you have to do it in a proper way. And like in the bimodal IT model that Gartner says, when you are planning for it, when you are going through your applications with the IT team and the CIOs sitting together, you would need to stack them, you would need to divide them into which application stacks fits where. You need to make conscious choice about lift and shift based on the cost, based on the time at hand. And you would do that, there's no doubt. Based on a lot of these reasons as well as other reasons, those conscious choices will be made, and a business plan will be placed for you to pick the right DevOps transformation. Moving on, few words about lift and shift and how do we do at REAN. It's a very programmatic, very robotic approach that we apply using tools and technologies and the experts in the area. In a very, very secured manner, we get the data center workloads migrated in the replication subnets as images and as secure volumes, and get your workload shifted and lifted and shifted easily to AWS. Some of the other tools what we use when we are looking at DevOps centric migrations or transformations are those that Ekta talked about when in the beginning of the graph. Along with those, there are certain other tools that become part of the transformation because your application actually uses them or you've been using them from some time. Let's focus a little more on the cloud-enabled DevOps, wherein we know it's low cost, it's pay as use, all of that. Let's focus from the cloud context on the scale up, scale down, and the programmatic deployment part of the story. In this slide, you see that there are a pool of servers that's sitting behind an elastic load balancer. Using the services like auto scaling, the CloudWatch metric, and using those matrices and the thresholds and setting it correctly, you could trigger the scale up and scale down and get the required elasticity that you need. It just works like a thermostat, right? That's the importance. That's what you get with cloud, and the elasticity being part of it inherently. Reliability. We all know, we even talked about DR being there to have the required reliability. But from a reliability perspective and the various services and offerings that AWS has, AWS offers its services in regions, and each of its regions has multiple availability zones. We really know that. We've been using that day in, day out. Let's try and understand a little more behind it. You might have even heard in reInvent, if you have watched or visited or attended that recently. When you actually start a server in US state's North Virginia region, there are 6 availability zones. Think of it, even when you want to do it in your data center, it's not a cost viable solution, right? 6 availability zones. Start your application in one AZ, and each time you take a backup on S3, it inherently, not even without you knowing about it, right? Inherently builds, replicates those into 3 different AZs. Put a load balancer ahead of it, pin up a new app in a new AZ, and you have your high availability. As simple as that, right? Using the right resources, right services from AWS, you get that. You save your HA cost, you save your availability and DR costs if you use it correctly. If you need a large server when you are moving into cloud, when you are migrating into cloud, you can very easily divide or split that into 2 or more small servers, and you pay as you use. In a highly scalable and elastic manner, if you use it correctly, you actually end up reducing your cost. And now with all of these services, you get continuous reliability. Anytime anything happens to the server, it'll automatically bring up a new server. With a very high focus on the security, we have our own VPC structure and standard that we typically use, and we use at Ellucian as well. We prefer to call it DevSecOps than simply DevOps when we are dealing with cloud, because you need a lot more security when you are at a speed of not light but close to light, right? And with all the secure VPC that is in place and the out of the box multi-layered subnets and VPCs that we bring in the controls for confidentiality, for integrity above and beyond what Amazon provides. The out of the box validations of the infrastructure, of the access, and of the assessment of various HIPAA and other rules that you may want to have brings in automatically out of the box from the tool sets that we have. And all of that has happened over a lot of experience working with customers like Ellucian and others, where we have actually migrated a lot of software workloads to cloud. So talking about all of these tool sets, if you think of it, REAN being one of the smaller companies in this set of companies that are working on this area in presence from last 3 to 4 years, how do we do it at scale? We do it at scale because over last few years of experience, we have almost created an assembly line. If you think of a car manufacturing, it's the efficiency and the scale of assembly line helps companies like Hondas and Toyotas actually compete very well. So that's what we have done. Some of these accelerators that we have, they're not products, they're just accelerators that we have, are helping us solve the problems that come up when companies, when enterprises get into DevOps and cloud transformation. Migrate Now helps you very quickly discover, move it to cloud. Deploy Now picks up those images, helps you provision in a much more secured, out of the box, multi-layered environments and VPCs, and do it repeatedly as you wish, because you would need to continue to destroy and delete, destroy and create or deploy the environments. Verify Now helps you verify not just the application for the security and performance, but even the infrastructure that you have created. It's pretty critical that the infrastructure that you are creating from infrastructure as code is looked at is verified and is looked at in a right manner. And once you have all of those in place in a assembly line like a setup working very well, if it let it be a single solution or set of 10, 100 solutions, the speed that you get, the time it takes for taking all of that, and the repeatability and consistency that you get to take all of that and transform the enterprises, it's immense. It's really like assembly line. You would need the compliance and architecture in form of documents, and Document Now helps you do that. Once you get there, it's pretty critical that migrated solutions, migrated workloads need to be managed very well. And Ops Now and automatic healing from the Heal Now helps us do that, helps us very well do that, which will not only help you with the backup and patch up, but the right monitoring and automated ways and out of the box healing scripts and healing solutions solves a lot of problems for you. So with that, let me hand it over to Sanju with the next slide.
Yeah, so thanks, Gigi. So one of the important points in this accelerator pipeline that Gigi showed, one of the important points is here we are not doing anything new. We are basically calling the same tools that Ekta had presented. There are so many services, but it is difficult to get really experienced people who really have the details of the know-how. And it is better. What accelerators does is it hides a lot of these complexities and allows you to get a good visualization, a good metric, and I may show you a couple of screenshots from a demo environment. So while I do that, the DevOps and cloud initiative at Ellucian, they wanted to move three business services onto AWS. We definitely achieved that on time. We helped them with spot instances, which are the services where you have to use, which you have to use for spot instances, how to go for reserved instances and things like that. I'll just quickly show you some of the how do the tools actually look just for a second. And so this is one of our deploy now tools where you will see all the AWS resources, NAT gateways, routing tables, all the details, how to use VPCs. You can simply drag and drop them, create a blueprint of your deployment, and then hit this deploy button. And before you do that, on all these nodes that you have, you can drag and drop various packages of MySQL, Magento, Hadoops. So things that take, even for experienced Hadoop developers, if it's taking 1 week to deploy Hadoop, here you can do it within 13 minutes. And there are several videos on YouTube which can show you how that happens. Once your deployment is done, you need to verify it, test it. You should have different jobs for testing it. You should find out how fast something fails, so that your pipeline, if something is going to fail and you still have to do high number of deployments per day, how to achieve that using these kinds of matrices and dashboards. And at the end of it, you need a very detailed report of the costing of various business units, how things are progressing, CISO reports, which will tell you about security, various projects which are running. You can have a drill down report, a good quality visualization and measurement across projects is absolutely essential for one to get into a good quality DevOps implementation. Okay, so moving back to uh, the last few minutes, we just have 3-4 minutes left. So what we essentially achieved at Ellucian is helping them to move very fast on some of these decisions that they had to take. It's not about whether Ansible was the right choice or Chef is the right choice to work on, for example, configuration management tool, which is the should we use Artifactory or not. So certainly you can argue and say that this may be a better choice, but more often than not we should focus on the outcome, the business result that we are trying to achieve. So it may not be whether we make the right choices or not, but it's critical to make a choice, and that's where REAN comes in, the experience comes in, where we can just help you that these are good choices, let's move on and make the business transformation happen. So that is where if you can take help from some of the experienced companies who have really done DevOps migrations at large scale and achieved the benefits of transformation, like automated deployments, consistent deployment cycles. So none of this is really a big surprise for others, but how you do it, what are the metrics you need to measure, these are important decisions that that you need to put. Okay, and it can very well be a multi-year project. Everybody has deadlines, so we need to make sure that the pipelines that really give you the highest business revenue impact are the ones that you move first. Okay, so with that, we'll have a few more minutes left. I'll just zoom through the last few slides and we'll open it up for questions. Uh, uh, so these are some of the things. We have another 120 apps that we need to migrate at Ellucian. To sum it up, it is about cloud and DevOps together that create a very high performance organizations. How to figure out the repeatability in the migrations in the apps that you have, so that your subsequent migrations become less costly. These are some of the important aspects you need to remember. Okay. So yeah, I think we are open for questions now. And while we take them, uh, once we migrate, we can also manage your solutions, and let's, yeah, so that was at a high level what DevOps implementation really means. And I'm trying to look at all the questions that we have received.
Yep, and the questions are being tallied at this point. And on your left-hand side, if you have any other questions, please feel free to submit those there. And we will get to as many as possible. And any that are not addressed here, we will address those offline. Also, there are a few polling questions here on this page. If you take a moment to fill those out during the Q&A, it'd be greatly appreciated. And with that, I can turn the floor over to Ikta, or it might be better if Sanju, if you read some of the questions. Ikta was having a little difficulty with the audio, so either one.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the questions, so there is a question around the cost part of it, on what are the kinds of cost reductions that we really see. So there are two parts to when we migrate. So today in your existing data centers, 75% of the cost is on maintenance and 25% is on the infrastructure. Okay, if you just look at it from an infrastructure migration only, then, and even if you say 50% of that 25%, you would get a good saving. What we need to do is all the maintenance and migration cost, the 75% of the maintenance cost, that when you want to reduce that cost down, then you really require DevOps kinds of pipelines to do things as automatically as possible. So that's where the combination of these two gives us a transformative experience. Uh, so that was one of the questions around cost.
Picking
Gigi, do you
another
see?
question there, yeah, picking another question there, which is from Parag. It says, what is the duration that we can look at for migrating to DevOps? So let me go ahead and comment, and Sanju, jump in when you want to. So it's not a button, Parag, that you just switch on and jump into DevOps. It's a process that you will have to get into. It's a cultural shift. Like, it's not an easy thing. It starts with even identifying where are you and where do you stand from the maturity model for DevOps, right? And what we have when we engage is we have some tool sets, we have some models, some frameworks from even identifying where do we stand, and knowing that and then transforming is what will help identify how long it is going to take to get into the actual benefits and to the maturity that is required.
Yeah.
I'll take another question.
So
I hope I am audible.
sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's a question from Ramu. Are there any self-service provisioning for databases which we provide in the environment, like Oracle, Postgres, MS SQL, and DB2? Yes, Amazon Web Services provide a managed database offering called as RDS, which is for RDBMS databases like Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, MySQL, Postgre. It does not cover DB2 as of now, but we have 6 different database engines which we support. So you can read more about relational database service of Amazon, which is a managed database offering. So rather than you deploying it on a EC2 instance, we will go ahead and manage these databases for you.
Yeah, I see. Thanks, Dave. I'll just try and pick one. I see there are multiple questions on the accelerator that I talked about. It says, how do I try? How can I try? Can I try it in my environment? All of that. I think, so like I said, and I even typed it, they're not product, they are like accelerators, right? So do not expect them to work as products. And underline, they use some of those AWS services that we talked about. So if you really want to try, I mean, you can leave your email or some contact, and then we can get in touch.
Okay. I think we are already out of time. What we can do is we can answer this question separately on emails and send them to all the attendees.
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay.
There's some generic
Yes.
questions if you want to take a stab at in the last 10 minutes. It says, how does DevOps deal with, and these are like all thought-provoking, so I think it might be good to share some ideas that you have in your mind. How does DevOps deal with big data, cloud, Docker, some of those
Okay.
questions?
So there are 3 main things that you need to look at when you're looking at DevOps. One is Cloud SecOps, which is a basic DevOps offering. Second is the data DevOps. So here you're creating the data lakes and making sure your data is isolated as well as secure, and still you're getting all the processing done with dynamic labs. This can help scientists, researchers to really, or even credit card companies to create data lakes related DevOps. And then the last one is Biz DevOps. So Biz DevOps offerings are related to how you can improve the direct number of proof of concepts you're doing, number of free trials you're doing, and the way you're offering it to the market. Instead of providing on-premise machines, how can you move to a subscription-based model and create multi-tenant solutions where your number of POCs, anybody in the world, not just the people who are selling things in a given territory, anybody in the world should be able to log in and try a particular offering from a customer, how to make those models happen, and how to create the pipelines to change these offerings to provide the new proof of concepts to the end customers. So these are biz DevOps related offerings. So these are kind of, you can think of them as different kinds of maturity models in DevOps, and maybe we can have another session to get into the depth of it, because it's a really deep field. Okay, so I think we have run out already 4 minutes ahead of time, so we should, what we can do is we will be getting back to you. We have you can send an email to sales@raincloud.com or and reach out to us. We are more than happy to help you answer many of these remaining questions.